All right, today's review is a bit of a special one. I am actually checking out the Hasbro Con exclusive Quintesson Pit of Judgement. And yeah, this is a really cool set. If you don't know, HasCon was an event that happened, it was like a month and a half ago, I think. And the exclusive, or one of the exclusives, or the Transformers exclusive, was the Quintesson Pit of Judgement, which basically had these 5 figures in it, which I will take a look at one by one. But first, I want to start off by looking at the box itself, which I'm going to have to cut away for because it definitely does not fit on this recording setup. So I don't usually show off the packaging for figures that I get because usually I'm not an inbox collector. I usually throw out all the packaging, but in this case, you know, it's a HasCon exclusive, and the packaging is actually really cool for this guy. As you can see, they've created like a little diorama here. This is obviously without any of the figures in it, that shows off the judgment, the throne room itself, or the courtroom, I guess you'd say, that has the little dock there for people to be kicked off into the Sharkticon pit. You can see they've got little Sharkticon fins coming out of there, and I can show it off with some of the figures in it. This is more or less how everything was packaged. So yeah, you can see it works okay. I think that the Prosecutor and Crannics look really well in here, and the other guys is a little bit out of scale. Like obviously, like the proportions are different to accommodate it being packaging for a toy, but I think that the Bailiff, the Sharkticon, and the Quintesson himself are all much too big for this setup. I'm interested in kind of like maybe taking these two guys and then finding some other to-scale Quintesson, like smaller figurines to actually like permanently display in the box, because like I don't want to display the figures in the box, but at the same time it feels a little bit odd to just have the empty packaging on my shelf. So I don't know, it'd be kind of cool to put some of those guys in there, and I don't think I'm going to have much of a use for Kranix otherwise, since I don't really know where else it goes on my display, since it's not really in scale with the other figures. Like I can sort of headcanon that the Prosecutor is smaller than all the other Quintessons and is a small guy, but I don't think that really works for Kranix. But yeah, it is a really cool packaging, and yeah, there's the outside of the box. There's some really nice artwork on the back as well that shows the courtroom scene, which is like, this is clearly much more in scale. It's like, yeah, look, you know, they're not quite the same size. Like Kranix is a little bit smaller, but not that much smaller. But yeah, I don't really blame them for doing that. I wish they had done maybe a PVC version of that guy. He's like the other one who's missing from the scene there. But yeah, very cool box, and I'll get back to the figures themselves now. All right, now back to the figures themselves. Here we have Cranix is a little just basic plastic PVC figure. The Prosecutor, a Sharkticon, the Bailiff, and the Quintesson Judge himself. So I'm going to start off by looking at the two little guys together, and then I'll transition to the other ones. All right, taking a look at Kranix and the Prosecutor here. These two guys are basically just little non-transforming figures that were included in this set. And as I stated earlier, I'm probably going to put these guys aside to put them in the diorama with some other more in scale figures, because these guys don't quite scale with the other figures perfectly. Because the Prosecutor was especially like more, you know, kind of on the level with the Quintesson Judge. Definitely shorter, but not this much shorter. And Kranix himself was, it seemed like basically the same height as Hot Rod and Cup in the movie, not basically a mini-con size. So definitely, you know, it doesn't scale perfectly. This would be more like if Kranix were human height or a little bit taller than that. He would, you know, scaling with the cars, he would probably be like, I don't know, somewhere between like 7 and 10 feet tall or something like that. Whereas he was definitely more on the same height as the other Transformers there. But looking at this guy first, this guy has no articulation whatsoever. He does have these 2 pegs on the bottom here. One of them can fit onto the pegs that are on the Quintesson Judge's arm, so you can kind of hold him up. And that's kind of neat. It doesn't really look like he's holding him, but, you know, it works well enough, I suppose. But other than that, he doesn't really do anything. He's got a relatively good paint job. Some paint details were like really tiny and they didn't include it, but I'd much rather that they included those paint details on the other figures in the set anyway, because this guy's just, he's okay. He's a little bit warped, at least mine is, so I might try taking like a hairdryer to him. Like, I don't like how one of his arms is kind of further out to the side, and the feet are kind of twisted in a way that he's sort of wobbly when he stands, which is like, you know, it's not perfect, but you know, he is neat for what he is. And the real show grabber of these two, I'd say, is the prosecutor himself. This guy does have a little bit of articulation. The head can rotate, and that's it. It's actually just on a peg here, so you could take it off. I'm considering maybe taking a mold of the different parts of this guy and then like replicating a new one. So I've got one to display with my Quintessons themselves, like on the shelf normally, and I guess in my headcanon there, the prosecutor would just be a little bit smaller than he was in G1 scale, and then have one to keep in the box itself, because he does really, like, as movie scale goes, I think these two work pretty well together, but they don't really work with the other figures in the set all that well. And then the other feature that he has is this little piece is actually a blast effect. So if you have you know, it's not the soft plastic like the other blast effects. It's a hard plastic, but if you've got, you know, it's just a regular 5mm peg, so you can plug that onto other things. I haven't really tested it out and see if this works particularly well on any of the other weapons we've received, but kind of neat that that's how they decided to do his little electric floating thing. But otherwise, it's a good sculpt. You know, it's got some good paintwork on it. Maybe they could have done a bit more on his face instead of just doing it in the paint silver or in the straight silver, but still works. The tentacles look great in this static pose that they're in. But yeah, that pretty much does it for these two guys. Not a whole lot to say about them other than, you know, they're two little neat inclusions in the set. All right, here we have the Sharkticon in the set, and this is just another repaint of the Titans Return mold, which unfortunately I don't have here with me to show off them together, but those ones were a little bit more toy inspired, and this guy is like, I guess, closer to movie colors inspired. He's a little bit bluer than the Sharkticons in the movies, but yeah, I don't mind having another one of these guys. They're still pretty cool. Articulation in the Sharkticon mode. His arms are just on a swivel right here, so they can rotate up. And then the legs are on a ball joint at the hip, a ball joint at the knee, which allows them to rotate. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then the jaw, of course, can open up that wide on this side and about that wide on this side, so you can be pretty much just flat on his teeth on the ground. But yeah. He looks good with his mouth open, looks good with his mouth closed. These little Sharkticons are good, at least in this mode. And to show off what I'm talking about there, to transform this guy, you take this section here, the tail, and you just lift it off, and we'll put that off to the side for right now. There's like a double hinge section here at the hips of the Sharkticon mode, and you fold those up so they'll become his shoulders in robot mode. And then you split the top half of the face here, and then these sections rotate around just like that, and these will be his legs, and then you take the shark head a half and rotate it to the back, and you can do whatever you want with the arms. I usually just like leave them off to the back. It's like pretty kibble heavy, which is like the main thing about this figure, but you know, it works. Then you rotate the arms around at the elbows and rotate them down. And you take the bottom jaw here and rotate it down. His head is in the back here, and it just rotates up on this light blue piece, and then you rotate it around, and then take the back fin here and just fold it up onto the back, and there you have the Sharkticon in his robot mode. And yeah, he's okay in this mode. Nothing super fantastic. He does look kind of, you know, dumpy and stupid, which is fine because he's a Sharkticon, but like, I would have preferred that they kept these parts of his head on his back somehow, because that's really what the Sharkticons look like, and like no one would care having like that huge kibble in the back here, because that's where it's supposed to be. Whereas on the legs, it's a little bit rough, just sticking off the back like that. His arms are also a little bit weird since they have this kind of natural curl in them. It looks okay when his arms are bent, but when they're straight out, it looks a little strange. But again, not the end of the world. I think, you know, as a little cutesy army builder, I think that he works relatively well. He's got this as his weapon, but unfortunately he can't hold it like an actual mace, like from this end. He has to hold it on this peg, so it's sort of sticking forward, which is a little weird, but you know, And then for storage, the only thing he's really got is he's got these peg holes on the back of his arms that you can kind of plug it into, have it sticking off the back of his arm there. That works well enough for me for storage, since I imagine that these guys are, usually holding their weapons anyway, since they're a little bit more savage and don't really, live a day-to-day life, as you might say. But yeah, he's okay. Articulation-wise, head rotates, shoulders are on a ball joint, elbows are on a ball joint, get pretty much a full bend there just because of the way that they're shaped. The legs are also on a ball joint, no thigh swivel. His knee bends about that much, which, it's not a lot, but it's more than you might expect him to have, given all of what's on the back of his feet here. But yeah, he's an okay little Sharkticon. I think, these guys really work better in the shark mode itself, but still pretty cute. All right, now moving on to the Bailiff, who is a pretty heavy repaint and remold of the Allicon mold that I reviewed a few weeks ago. You can see some of the differences here. Some of the obvious things are the same and some of the obvious things are different, but then there's also a few weird things that I wouldn't have expected them to remold that they did, like the thighs, the top part of the thigh, or the bottom part, I suppose, of the thighs here is actually a remold. And then there's obviously the more obvious things like the chest and the head are remolded. The shoulders are remolded to have these bigger spikes, and then he's got a different weapon. And then in alligator mold, he does have a different head as well. And I think that's it. I think everything else is the same. But yeah, I love that new head sculpt. He definitely looks like the Bailiffs from the movie. But yeah, it's a cool use of this mold because, like, honestly, these guys did kind of look similar to the Allicons in robot mode in the movie as well. So yeah, it's clever. His new weapon here, he can hold in either hand, but you sort of have to separate it to get it to actually come out of his hand, since it does have the objects on both sides of it. But yeah, it's a cool weapon. This part here, the brown part, is hard plastic, and then this part is soft plastic, which definitely makes it feel a little bit less sturdy than the spear that the Allicons had, but it's kind of more what is to be expected. Like, it was an unusual oddity that the weapons that the Allicons had were like almost entirely hard plastic. It would be much more expected for them to do stuff with this kind of flexible, pliable plastic, which pretty much all of the gray parts on him are made up of, other than like the crotch, the hands, and the biceps here. Those are all hard plastic, but the arms, the shoulder spikes, the little spikes on the head, they don't feel quite as pliable as this piece here, but it definitely still a little bit flexible. I'm just gonna kind of breeze through the transformation because we saw it a couple weeks ago, but I will do it on camera here for you. Tab in the arms, rotate down the fists, unpeg the back from the alligator head, flip this bit forward, flip that up, rotate around the waist, flip that in, rotate this around, compress the head in, lift up the legs, tab that in, rotate the arms around, and there you have him in his alligator mode. And these guys didn't have a alt mode in the movie, or at least not one that we saw, so really they didn't have to do anything different here. But what I think is kind of interesting is they actually did remold the head here from the Allicon mold, and I'll transform him real quick to show that off. As you can see, the head sculpts are actually different. I think that they re-sculpted it to look a bit more like what his chest looks like in robot mode, whereas this one is designed after what his chest looked like. But they sort of didn't have to do that, since we don't really have any frame of reference for what this guy turned into. We know that he had a tail, so it was likely something like this, but I don't know. Kind of neat that they did that, but I don't think it was totally necessary. What's kind of interesting, though, is that his teeth are painted on the side, but not the front teeth, which is, again, whatever. I probably would agree with them when I looked at the actual breakdown of how the paint budget got mixed up, but it's a little odd. But again, this guy, especially since he didn't even have an alt mode, and this is the weaker of the two molds in this mold anyway, then I think I'm mostly going to be keeping him in Bailiff mode, especially since it looks so good. But yeah, He does still have the, I didn't show it off in robot mode, but the tail knife here that's just stored in the back there. And yeah, he's pretty cool. I like the green that they use. I really like this brown. It's like, it's not metallic, but it does have like a little bit of a sheen to it. And it's just ultimately a very sort of pleasant brown, which is a weird thing to say about the color brown. But yeah, he's articulation in both modes is pretty much the exact same as the Allicon, with obviously like a little differences in the way the head moves, just because it's a different shape. But yeah, pretty cool figure, and definitely a good inclusion in this set. Then all right, last but certainly not least is the Quintesson Judge himself. This is the only figure in the set that is a new mold to me. I mean, aside from the little non-transforming guys. He is a repaint of the Earthrise Quintesson Judge that was released about the same time as he was. It's still not really showing up in a lot of stores, so like a lot of people are actually getting this version first. They're not a whole lot different. The blue piece down here is clear, and then there's like some differences on the paint decals on the face, and then the gray of the egg body shape is a slightly darker color, and that's like pretty much the only differences I can tell. So with this being my first exposure to the mold, I am really into this guy. He looks great. I love the faces there, that we have that one. There's like a few different things that the faces are called. The ones that I learned was this is death, and then war, judgment, wrath, and wisdom. And I'll look at those each individually. I know there's a few different sort of names for what those are, but those are the ones that I like first read online, and the ones that I like the best. But yeah, whatever, to each his own. But yeah, here we have the face of death. Very cool here. He does have some articulation in the jaw. 3 of them do, and then 2 of them don't. War here does not have any articulation in the face, but he looks very nice with those chubby, jolly cheeks there. Judgment also is the other one without any mouth articulation, but looks very cool. Probably my second favorite face, right behind Death. Wrath here has an opening and closing jaw. And then lastly, Wisdom has an opening and closing jaw. Very cool. And yeah, articulation in this mode, pretty much all what I just showed off with the face, and then also each of these tentacles, which are just kind of like a pliable plastic, they're on a hinge at the top here, so you can rotate them about that far up and that far down, and that's pretty much it. If you don't really like the way that they're sort of like posed, and they got a little bit weirdly warped in the packaging itself, you can kind of, like take a hairdryer to them, or like just bend them back and hold them that way with, static non-moving objects for a few hours or a night or two, and it should work. But yeah, this guy comes with a couple of accessories as well. He comes with his chair here, or his throne, judge's chair. I'm not sure what it's a chair. He can sit in it. He's got there's a peg right here, and there's a couple pegs on the bottom of his sort of like blast effect, electric beam thing. And you can just plug it in, just like that. The peg is a little bit longer than the depth of the hole, so it doesn't stay in super well. Like it sits like maybe 0.5 millimeter off the brim of the chair there, which is not great, because then he kind of wobbles around. But yeah, it's an okay effect. The chair is something that I kind of just leave off to the side, honestly. Like, I'm not totally thrilled with it, but if you want him to have a little seat for him to pass judgment, then there it is. And then he also comes with a little gun right here. It has a regular peg that other figures can hold, but it also has a hole there that you can plug in these little nubbins on his tentacles onto, so that the judge can hold it himself. And yeah, it's a cool effect. I think if a Quintesson were to hold a gun, that's pretty much how it would work. Because they weren't about to like articulate these so they could actually like wrap around and hold an object. It's just a really simple little pistol. There's a little peg there for blast effects to plug onto. I wonder if, does this guy have, yeah. That doesn't really fit, but that's basically what it would be like if you had a better blast effect, which I didn't bring any over here to show off, but you've seen it by now. You know what it looks like. very simple gun. If you want to store it, you can like plug it onto the bottom of the chair here. There's a couple peg holes. There are places inside him that you can store it, like inside here. You could just toss it in there. I thought there was a, yeah, I guess there's, oh, there is a peg on the inside of the little cage section here, which I'll show off in a sec. So you can, I think this is actually how it was packaged too. So you can plug it in, peg it in there. But yeah, in terms of storing it, I don't know if he would really store it inside himself like that, so it's a little odd, but it works. And then before I get into transforming him into his alt mode, I do want to show off that he does have this lever here. I was rotating the faces before just by physically doing it, because there's kind of like little locking points. But what you can also do is put your finger on this section here and then on here, and then actually spin it like that, and that's pretty cool. It doesn't always like actually line up onto the sections it's supposed to, but usually it does. Kind of cool. And if you do it like soft, you can kind of get it to do like one face, or if you do it hard, then you can get it to just like spin randomly. So yeah, pretty cool. I generally just do it by moving it manually, but yeah, whatever. All right, so to transform this guy, because yes, he does have an alt mode, even though in the movie, these guys, and in the third season of the show, these guys didn't really transform, but to sell it as a Transformers toy, they had to give it something, and it doesn't bother me. It's not a great alt mode, but like I'm totally satisfied just having this guy untransformed on my shelf all the time, and never really looking at the alt mode. It's kind of neat, but it's not really a selling point for this figure. So to start off, you actually want to remove the blast effect here. There's a little lever down here that you pull down, and then you can pull it out. It has these little grabby claws that when you leave it extended out, it sort of locks it in, and when you pull it down, it loosens it so you can pull it out. And then you take this section here and take it off, and then take this section off, and then open the cage, and you can take the gun out if you had it in there. And put those off to the side for right now. And then each of the faces basically will flip up on a hinge. And they kind of just like sit up here sort of unceremoniously. Like you can still obviously see that it's just like 5 weird faces and it doesn't look all that great. But like, again, you know, for a Quintesson alt mode, this is basically as non-invasive as they could get it. And then you take these panels here that were behind the faces and fold them down. You do have to have it so that the death face was facing forward, because there's 2 little tabs here that go into 2 notches, whereas all of the other ones just have a single one. So you do, for it to work, you do have to have it so death was facing forward. And then you just bend all these down on their hinges. They're on, most of them, aside from this one, are on like a double hinge, so you have to like make sure that they hinge out properly. And then you take the tentacles and just rotate them up mostly to get them out of the way. It's not like a super great use of them, but yep. And then you can kind of sit like that, and then you take the chair itself and you fold out the sides here. It's just tabbed in. And then flatten it out, and then you can see these sections here have the attachment, the what do they call it? Is it the combat attachment? I can't remember what they called it, but it attaches to basically like other Earthrise bases and stuff like that. So you can take either of these and attach it to the end here of the this platform, and yeah, you have that thing going on. It's a kind of neat little. Excuse me. Kind of neat little base mode. I think it looks really weird and awkward. You're supposed to just take this section and just like sit it on the top, which is a little weird. It does have these 2 pegs on it, so you can peg it into the bottom here, but I find that because there's two peg holes right there, right next to where the blast effect plugged in, but it kind of messes with the tentacles and stretches them a little bit, so like I don't think it really works, and it's hard to even tab in, honestly. Yeah, I can't even get it to do it. But also, on the bottom of the blast effect, it does have 2 sections there. So if you want to store the blast effect, then you can tab it into the top there and then use that. And it sits maybe a little bit better than it would have otherwise, but it kind of just sits there. It's not great. And then the little jail section here, you can open up, and if you have it like this, it can actually tab into the bottom here, and then you can open it up and like put Crannics inside, and that's pretty cool. Or other MicroMasters would fit in there too. It's a neat little setup, but I really can't imagine that anyone would display a Quintesson like this rather than in its robot mode. Like, it's neat for what it is, but I think, like, in my sort of headcanon, like, this mode doesn't really exist, because it would be kind of weird for the Quintessons to transform into this little weird jail area. You can also put them like inside here, but you know, it's neat as a play feature, but I think, like, canonically this doesn't really exist, at least for me. You know, whatever you want to do with your toys and your setup, but that's just kind of the way I think about it. I pretty much just ignore this mode because, like, the robot mode is just so much better, and I don't really think of the Quintessons as being creatures that do transform. So, you know, not fantastic, but at least when you can flatten out the chair like this, it makes it easier to store if you don't want to have it out in your display. But yeah. I'll quickly flip him back to robot mode and do some size comparisons, because I didn't really do that when I was in that section, but it's okay. Does make very satisfying clicking sounds, so it is kind of fun to transform, but the end product is nothing really to write home about. But yeah. And that's the thing too, is that you can't really just like have this lid section. Like, you can just sit it on there, but it sort of sits on there weird. You kind of secure it on with the jail section. So, like, since I'm never transforming him really, like, to me this section doesn't exist, which is kind of a bummer because it would be a cool little extra accessory, but you do have to use that to hold that on there. And even then, if you like flip it upside down, like, it doesn't really hold in there. It just kind of keeps it in place. But yeah. Here he is with basically just, you know, an average size deluxe. This is Siege Sideswipe. And then here he is, of course, with the Allicon in his alligator mode. Cool to see those guys together, since, you know, he is the one of the Quintesson, you know, guys on the planet. And then you already saw the other ones together in their in the first shot in the video. But yeah, it's a really good set, you know. It's got a lot of fun stuff going on with it. Although these two don't really scale with the other ones, like, I still enjoy that they included them in the set. And they do look cool in the box together, but, like, everyone does look a little bit crowded, like I said. So it's, you know, I like the box display, but I think I'm going to try to find, like, a smaller Quintesson and maybe, like, those little tiny turbo changer Sharkticons to go in there with these two guys. And I think that will be a really cool setup, because these three, I think, are a little bit too big for that world. And, you know, I wouldn't have wanted them to make, like, a huge big box that, you know, accommodates these guys to scale or anything, because, like, that would have just been absurdly big for the, you know, the packaging of toys that are in it. And these guys really are the main attraction here. But yeah, very, very cool set. I'm not disappointed at all. I'm so happy I picked this up. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do BotBots reviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then other reviews, usually a little bit less grand in scale than this, on Sundays. But yeah, here we have the Transformers PulseCon Pit of Judgement.